Laureen, welcome to the Hack Your Lack podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one. Obviously, you started a company, was it about 10 years ago now? And so the first question I wanted to ask was, what was it that made you want to start Fresh and Clean?
So it really comes down to my father. I mean, the story is long and short, and I've said it, a million different ways, but not to, go on a tangent about it about it. But yeah, it started with my father. My parents are originally French, so they immigrated here about 32 years ago. And the quality of the food between what you have here in the States and in Europe is totally different. So I think coming here from Europe and overindulging in fast food really took a toll on my father's health. He gained an exorbitant amount of weight, had really terrible levels when it came to his cholesterol and everything like that. And the doctor basically told him, hey, if you don't do something quick, we might not see you next year. And being that my dad is so family oriented and family means so much, I think that really struck a chord in him. Like, I need to do something. So for him, he went cold turkey vegan, and Fresh and Lean originally started as a vegan company. Started making meals in my one bedroom apartment while I was going to school at the time. I would do it on the weekends, and really supporting him. And then people started to notice and wanted the same done for them. So started doing that, doing little, driving routes for myself, and would deliver the meals on the weekend. And during the week, I would go to school.
Nice. That's incredible. So were you, was it something that you kind of fell into? Would you consider yourself a business-minded individual at the age of 18?
I think so. I mean, I was going to business school for the fashion industry. I think my father has a very strong business background. So my whole entire life, I think that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It's super fun to think of different business ideas and to kind of brainstorm. And that's something that I did a lot with him, talking about at the time, just different things. I don't know. But I always wanted to get into business. And when I was younger, I wanted to get in the fashion business, and I wanted to start a line of sustainable clothing. And so I went in and I studied manufacturing for the fashion industry and the business side of fashion. And yes, I would say that I did fall into this just because of the opportunity that presented itself. I wanted to not only help my father, but this is something that I realized could help millions of Americans. We live in a society that is very driven around food, and not always the right kind of food. And the mindset that people have around food is very different, especially 11 years ago. 11 years ago, there wasn't as much education on what the body needs. There also was a huge lack of exactly what we're doing right now. And in 11 years later, what we're super accustomed to. We're accustomed to getting not only food delivered to us, but pretty much everything, down to toilet paper, which 11 years ago was not the case.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that the opportunity presented itself, and I didn't even think twice about it. It was something that I felt was a little bit of a calling for me, and something that I felt like I really needed to dive into fully.
Yeah. Well, I can't think of a more relevant food service than one that's convenient and also healthy. And it's funny because I was actually talking with the co-founder of the Honest Company, Christopher Gavigan, last week, and just kind of talking about how the landscape looked completely different 10 years ago, and how I myself can remember, so I'm 27 now, but I can remember thinking back then when I was around 18, there's not a lot of conscious thought going into, what's going in my body and what are the products that I'm using and how they affect me. And so was this something that you saw in the market that was needed? Were you starting to see these trends and you thought, this is something that people need to get on board with? Because like you said, there's so much fast food, and obviously there's so many negative things that are coming out of the fast food industry.
Yeah, I think there's a couple elements to that question. So I think number one, there's a huge need for redefining fast food. And that's something that I believe like wholeheartedly in. I think that we're so accustomed to thinking that fast food is tied to a huge corporation like McDonald's or like Burger King, but really fast food in the purest sense is food that can be enjoyed quickly. That could easily be a meal that is good fuel for the body. So, that's a huge mission, is, redefining that concept. At the beginning of it, it was about health, and convenience kind of was a secondary element. But quickly it became a first element. And then the fact that the food is healthy and that it tastes good is kind of a bonus, right? And I think as we go into the way that we're living now, and thanks to Amazon, of the ultimate convenience, now we want that. And so it was absolutely a need. And at the beginning, I remember, doing customer service and doing the cooking and doing the packaging. And while I was doing customer service and talking to customers, I would get the question a lot, like, wait, you're going to mail me my food? And I would say, yeah, you're going to get a package. It's going to be refrigerated or whatever the situation is. And it's just going to arrive at your doorstep. And it was this weird notion to a lot of people. And then I think as we kind of grew towards that more, now, like, we don't even question it. And of course, there's a lot of meal services now coming up, which is great. There's obviously a huge market for it. And I think that there will continue to be a huge market for it. But yeah, convenience is key now.
Yeah. So what does that look like for you? Because I've heard Jeff Bezos talk about how, the customer is never satisfied. And he almost talks about it in a great way, like he prefers it that way. And it's always driving him to be more successful. And so for you, what does that look like? Because logistically, getting people food quickly is one task. But then on top of that, getting fresh organic food is a whole nother thing. So how have you kind of managed that? Was there challenges in the front end of that? And how did you kind of maintain that moving forward?
Yeah, there was a bunch of challenges. I mean, for one, I started when I was 18 years old. I did not have a manufacturing background in food, right? And you're talking about dealing with very sensitive things like fresh ingredients. So there was a lot of kind of trial and error, a lot of needing to take risks. The other thing is that I started with no outside capital, and still to this day don't have any capital. So there wasn't a lot of money to, throw into testing. So a lot of what needed to be tested or done was kind of done in phases. And I would, be like, okay, this is maybe a good idea. I'm going to try it and see what happens. And when I look at what I did, 6 years ago and the way that I do things now, I kind of chuckle or, look back and think like, oh, that was cute that you tried it that way. But I would have never known, how to do it better if I didn't learn from things that didn't work. And so that was a big part of it. And then obviously, as you grow and you're able to reinvest into the company in a more meaningful way, you can, bring on better equipment and things like that. But there was a lot of testing that went into shipping the product, and even at the beginning, like keeping it fresh, putting it in just Tupperware containers. You can only get what you get at home, really, right? Like 5 days ish, which is not sustainable for the business model. And so I tried things like, putting the Tupperware containers in a vacuum sealed bag and vacuum sealing that, which was a terrible idea. And it took forever and it was just a nightmare, to being able to get a machine that will, do a vacuum seal in a tray, and then, realizing that there's better machinery out there, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, there's been, with every single element of the business, and even to this day, we manufacture about 300 or more thousand meals on a weekly basis. And I'm still learning. And it's just, that's kind of the cool thing about having a business that is growing quickly and, doing something that is really exciting. I might be a weirdo, but like manufacturing is exciting to me, like the machinery and talking about it and problem solving, it's always about problem solving and finding a better way to do things. And it's great. Yeah.
Yeah. What role has problem solving played? Because I know, talking about the food industry, obviously you're dealing with perishables. So I can imagine, especially on the front end, you were dealing with a lot of, especially bootstrapping. It's like you have this money and this harder money that you're putting into this product, and then that product isn't something like a table I have this laptop on or a set. So, I mean, what role did that play, and maybe some advice for people dealing with perishable products that they're having a hard time dealing with?
I would, it's kind of tough because you're right, like dealing with perishables, like a perfect example is like shipping perishables. If your shipment doesn't get there on time, most likely that product is lost. And so it's like, how do you optimize shipping this product, knowing that you have to have leeway
Right.
with carriers, especially in a pandemic, especially with what happened a month ago with the weather delays in the Midwest. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these things are out of our control. And so we're constantly testing things like packaging, constantly testing things like how many gel packs to put in a package, what are, I don't know, like when we vacuum the meals, like we send them to the shelf to get shelf life tested, like constantly. We want to look at the mixes. Sometimes two vegetables that go together, you could vacuum seal that, but they're gassy. They just don't work together. There's all of these like really like, I don't know, finicky
Yeah.
details that
Subtle.
go with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you have to think about. And so that's been a big part of it, is like making sure that our packaging lasts enough to where if FedEx or UPS or whoever doesn't deliver the package, we don't lose that.
Yeah.
And then we don't, have to reship the customer the package. It's bad for the customer experience and it's bad for our bottom line. Now we're out two packages with one payment. So there's just all of these like little things that you just need to kind of like think through and just really test to know what will work for you.
Yeah. No, that's great. So the last half of this interview, if you will, Lorena, I want to focus on young entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
And I know it's something that is it's almost a sexy word now, you know what I mean, in the world of Gary Vee and all that. But there's obviously a lot of hard work that's associated with it.
Yeah.
But with the hard work, obviously, you can see a lot of fruit, come from that. And so to start off with this subject of young entrepreneurship, what's some advice you might give yourself? Because obviously at 18, I know at 18, I felt like I knew nothing. Like when I look back now at 27 and look at myself at 18, I feel like I was, yeah, I don't even want to go there. You know what I mean? And so what was that like navigating? Because I know you kind of talked about, getting to starting it. But what was that like as an 18-year-old? I'm sure that there were weekends, I mean, you weren't going out, and I'm sure that there was a lot of sacrifices made. So kind of walk us through that and what's maybe, some advice that you would give to that 18-year-old.
I think persistence and dedication. I think that for me, I am super dedicated to the company. You talk about sacrifice, and 100% that there's things that you need to sacrifice. And I talk about, a lot of my friends at the time were going to school, going to like actual college, and they would go down and be like, oh, like come down for the weekend. And I would either not be able to go. And again, that was a choice, and I had to feel good about making that choice. Or the other part was like I would go, but I would be in the room working. I would close the laptop and go, socialize, but then I would wake up super early in the morning and I would work again. So I think just the dedication and the persistence to what you're doing is super important. And then knowing that not everybody is on that path, and it's okay. And there's nothing wrong with being on your journey, but you have to own that journey. And people aren't going to understand sometimes, like putting in all the hours, and killing yourself over the business or the idea or the dream that you have, for yourself. And it's okay. And I think that's the biggest thing, is like it's okay. No one has to understand what you're doing, as long as you feel good about what you're
Yeah.
doing. And that's like a big thing.
Was there anything that caught you off guard when starting it? I mean, that just you maybe didn't think about or take into account when starting it?
I think just like how hard it is. Like, and not that I thought that it was going to be an instant success. That's not the person that I am, but it was really, really hard. And I think that if I didn't have, the support of my family, or if I just, for me, there was no like like failing was not an option, right? I had this and I was like on a war path. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. But it was hard, and it's not for everybody. And there's just so much respect out there for people who do go through what they go through as an entrepreneur, and building a business. And, you don't get paid for a really long time. And, your employees are number one and the business is number one. And you're not, and that's a big thing. And I think that a lot of people go into business thinking that they're going to make money. A lot of people are like, I'm going to start this business and I'm going to be a millionaire, like in a year. And if that happens for you, that's awesome, but it most likely won't happen. And that's okay, And so I think it's like setting those expectations of like what that's going to look like, and not living in the future. I feel like a lot of times it's like, okay, like in 2 years this is how it's going to be, in a year this is how it's going to be. And it's, for me at least, it's really important to focus on the present, and like what's happening right now.
Yeah, that's great. That's really, really great. You talked about how you had no capital, and I said going, and bootstrapping into, 8-figure revenues. This is something that actually hits home for me, Laureen, because I'm in a spot now to where I have a full-time job managing over 100 people,
Mhm.
and I have no outside funds coming in to kinds, and trying to combat my resources and understand, how do I take this money, put it here, and ensure that this money is going to be best served in this spot. And so, specifically for young entrepreneurs, but this could be for anybody. But what was that like for you, and how did you create a sustainable incline while not having any of that capital?
For me, I think it was like prioritizing, what's important for the business. So realizing that like I'm not going to be able to do exactly what I want right away. And maybe, I'm going to have to do something that is a band-aid, or something that's like a temporary, so that I can get to ultimately where I want to be. So for me, when I think about the kitchens that we started in, they were shared kitchens. They weren't exactly what we would need to like scale up the manufacturing, but they were what we had to work with at the time. And so I made it work. I also think that, just really like strategically thinking about every single piece. It's a puzzle. So thinking about, if I do this, how does it affect every other piece of the puzzle? Thinking about scalability also in a way that makes sense for the future. I think a lot of people, and this is something that my father really ingrained in me, they think about the now and they don't think about the later. Not to go back to my original point about like, I'm going to be a millionaire next year, but talking about like setting yourself up for that in a very
Yeah.
smart way. So
Yeah.
how do you scale your business um, with what you have? And again, sometimes that is doing double the work, but it's just what you have in front of you.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really about prioritizing what's important to the business now, and making those like small incremental changes, or those investments in things that are going to pay off later.
Right.
And sometimes it is small, and I think it's important to think like that. I still think like that even now. I tell my team this, I have people that come from now that are on the team that come from big manufacturing backgrounds with companies that have a lot of money. And when they come in, I tell them like, I don't work like that. We have a lot of resources now, but I still have the mindset of someone who doesn't.
Right.
And that's what's super important for me in making sure that the business stays profitable and lean, is being super thoughtful about every single thing that gets done.
Yeah. And I think it's almost a blessing, because if you were to start a business, maybe you're listening to this podcast and you started your small business last month, and say you had an investor come in, giving you $100,000, you don't have that, know about to where, I'm going to make this small adjustment, or you're like trying to figure it out with that large sum. So I think, it makes us a lot more crafty as we grow at the same pace of our business, opposed to all at once, because if it's all at once, then it can get out of hand really quickly. And so I think
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's valuable information, for sure. So is it cool if we do some rapid fire, Lorraine?
Sure.
Cool, let's do it. Um, so what do you see the future of the food industry looking like?
Well, I think that the food industry, and it's great. It's becoming more clean. It's
Yeah.
becoming more relevant. There's conversations. There's really smart people doing really amazing things, and I think it's great. So I think that what we're used to, which is the fast food, the processed ingredients, that's kind of a thing of the past. And I hope and that people continue to be educated and they challenge what is the norm, what was the norm, and create a new norm. We're a very unhealthy society, and we need to, make a big change.
Without question. What's your favorite food?
Uh-oh.
That was that's off the cuff right there. You're getting the off the cuff question. That's not even on the list there.
Well, I could probably live on sushi and pasta. It's just like I can never get sick of it.
I know. I say this. I could eat sushi every day, 3 times a day. I promise you, I wouldn't get tired of it.
Yeah, or just Japanese as a cuisine. There's just so many options. But yeah.
No doubt. Is there any trend in the industry you think will fizzle out right now?
I think fad diets. I hope that fad diets fizzle out. I think that people need to look at their body as something that's, again, like investing in, and sometimes you invest in something and you nurture it, and it's like planting a seed. Fad diets are not good for the body. It should be looked at as a lifestyle, and also everyone's body is different. What works for me doesn't work for you, and that is okay. So I hope that people just take that into consideration, and health and journey should be a consistent thing and not just something that you think is going to happen overnight.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Last one, is there any trend in the food market right now you think more people should be paying attention to?
Man, I think I keep seeing, which is really great, these new upcoming companies that are doing really good, like meatless products. And I think that, or even like hydroponic growing systems, just really creative ways to grow food. And people that are coming out, I preach clean. This is what we do. We manufacture clean food. And we're going way more into that direction. So I just think people need to keep on that. Read the back of everything that you eat. If you can't pronounce it, don't eat it. And just like, pushing forward on that.
Yeah, I have to go back to it, but that's actually pretty much what Christopher answered last week, was plant-based and sustainable products like that. And I couldn't agree more. So that was a great conversation. I promise you, Laureen, I could sit here for 3 hours. There's a lot of that conversation that I want to go a lot more in detail with. But maybe we'll have to run it back sometime. But thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you.
Yeah, of course. Anytime. Thank you so much for having me.